Hector Bellerin, Bellerin, Hector Bellerin.
Owned by Mustafi. Bellerin, brilliant. 2-2.
Hector Bellerin, Bellerin, Hector Bellerin. Na 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 na. That's a song. Yeah.
All right, everybody. There is an old pop song, a Tom Petty song, with a refrain that says, "The waiting is the hardest part." We've been a lot of waiting here if you're an Arsenal fan, and that's the theme of this week. The waiting is the hardest part. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Saved by the Bellerin, the Arsenal football podcast here on the Sports Talk Line Network. I'm your moderator, Raphael. I'm joining you from the United States, and we have the full complement of our English analyst. To my left is Ryan. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hello, mate. Hope you're doing well.
I am quite well. Right below him, Freddie. Freddie, welcome back to the pod. Good to have you.
Good to be on again, guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and obviously, last but certainly not least, right below me on your video pod dial is Sam. Welcome back,
mate.
Sam.
Everything okay?
Everything is good. I'd be remiss if we didn't notice there's a bit of happy news for the pod, a bit of happy news for our man Ryan and his missus. They welcomed their first child today, a little girl. Seems everybody is doing well. Congratulations, sir. To you and the missus.
Thank you. We're all doing well.
All right. Great news. All right, so let's leap in. Again, we're waiting. We got a little bits of good news. Freddie, let's come in. Let's start with what we know. Dani Ceballos is back. It seems that the club pulled off a bit of good business. Correct me if I'm wrong. The sounds of it, they were able to get him back for a second year on loan on even better terms than last year's.
Well, yeah. Last year, what Real Madrid, as with many loans, split the wage. Basically, what they've done this time is waived the fee. So there's no upfront loan fee, but Arsenal will be covering his wage for the season. So it's another player on a fairly good wage, but obviously one that we're not paying any sort of fee for. So yeah, a great bit of business, and obviously we all saw how influential he was towards the end of the season, especially after the lockdown. Really was standout player, and I think there was a stat floating around the other day, a stat graph which showed that he was first in pretty much every key department in the Arsenal team for ball recoveries and passing accuracy and stuff like that. So he really came into his own. Club were obviously really keen to keep him, and he's turned down a couple of decent offers from good European teams to come back for next season. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, it says a lot again for our managers pool and the excitement that the roster has coming in. Let's bring you back, Ryan. You posted something in our group before we got going. We've talked a lot about possible outgoings, a lot of names on the list, and we'll get to a couple of them in a moment. Interesting today, though, from training, it looks like Mesut Ozil is really kind of back and integrated into the squad, right? Just hit the ground running.
Yeah, there's quite a few images of him training with the squad, which wasn't the case before the FA Cup final and such. But hopefully he's jumped on board the boat that Mikel Arteta keeps referencing, because we're better with Ozil than without him. So hopefully he's on board. Or is there's another politic move just to make everyone seem like he's available again?
All right. Well, it just seems in line with what Freddie was just mentioning. There's a good mood about the team, which is what we want to see. Again, the season is come up very, very quickly. Sam, let's bring you back in. We're talking about ingoings. We're talking about outgoings. A long list of possible outgoings. Again, what we're waiting for is hoping Arsenal can kind of dig under the cushions in the couch and find $1 here and find some coins there and squeeze them all together and buy themselves something really nice and along the lines of Thomas Partey. To that end, some very encouraging news from Italy today. It seems that Arsenal and Fiorentina have come to an agreement on Lucas Torreira's transfer.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a overall 27 million euro total package. I think it's going to be €6 million up front, with a obligation to buy next summer. So at the end of the day, Lucas Torreira is a bit redundant in the team at the moment because we're not really playing with a defensive midfielder. Personally, I don't think that he's that great as a deep line playmaker, nor do I believe that he's good at being an advanced playmaker either. So his role in the team, unfortunately, is a bit redundant. I hate to keep mentioning the man, but it seems that Unai Emery seemed to have all but effectively ended Lucas Torreira's Arsenal career when he was dragging us down to the mud, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, some misgivings. If fans are eager to go out and bring in somebody the likes of Thomas Partey, but it seems it's always, and this is a natural reaction, when a player goes out, there is some sadness, and I've heard some, and in this case, a little knee-jerk response that the club did not get enough in return for Lucas Torreira. Now, obviously, they did not get, according to these reports, it seems, as you said, somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 to 27 million euros. That's not what they paid for him. It's a little bit less, not ridiculously less, but it is less. But as you've pointed out, he's not and was not a starter. And talk a little bit about the return, but also talk about the fact that with him out, we're looking around who's to replace him. Granit Xhaka's lonely in that position right now. It seems that almost Arsenal is kind of obligating themselves to go out and fill that spot with whomever.
Yeah, as you say, that it leaves us extremely light in the middle of midfield, so that indicates that we are going to be going out for a midfielder. There's been numerous reports over the last couple of days, and the language of the English media has been extremely telling, so to speak, because they're saying that we need to shift a couple of bodies out to then go and get Thomas Partey or Aouar. So the fact of the matter is we need to shift players out, because I think I saw on Sky Sports this morning saying we've got 34 senior players on the books at the moment. So having a squad limitation of 25, we are going to need to shift people regardless. So it looks like there's going to be a lot more going out. But for me, Thomas Partey is, I would say, would be our priority, because he gives us a lot more. I know people are dreaming of Aouar because obviously his playmaking skills and threat from midfield, again, gives us something else. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe we can go out and get both. So unfortunately, players are going to have to leave. In the case of Lucas Torreira, people will be a bit sad, but he's surplus to the requirements to a certain extent, especially when you're thinking about upgrading in that position. So at the end of the day, Arteta said he's going to have to make some tough decisions. Is this one of them? Possibly. But for me, it's a no-brainer. If we can get him out, I know it's not as much as what we've paid for him, but you've got to take into context as well. Over the last couple of seasons, his market value probably has gone down due to certain things that have gone on in terms of quality of playing, injuries, and also losing his place as a starter. So, as I say, if he's going to be going and a couple of others going to be going for Partey or Hossein Aouar, I'm all for it, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, Freddie, again, Sam has pointed to a list of outgoings. Looks like the list is pretty substantial right now, even early on. Mkhitaryan is out. Looks like Torreira is out. Three more names that I want to kick around, but two that seem kind of linked earlier. When we talked on Tuesday, it looked like they might be going out together. Obviously, Socrates, and I'm talking about Sead Kolasinac. Kolasinac suddenly has seen a market kind of spring out of nowhere for him since the last pod. We were talking about him going back to Schalke on loan, but now it seems some bigger clubs have come up. Arsenal could realize some decent money for him.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the assets that you'd look at and think, right, he could potentially bring in a decent fee. He's also on a very good wage because when he joined the club, he came on a free transfer. So he's one that the club would certainly look at and think not essential for us to keep in terms of his ability and his standing in the squad, and also a saving on wages and potential to bring in a fee and make a profit on obviously what we brought him in for, because we brought him in for nothing. But you're right, it seems like there's a bit of market for him now. A few German teams appear to be interested. The only reservation I'd have is that Arsenal are potentially a little bit light in that position. Obviously, Kieran Tierney is the outstanding choice at left back, and that's going to be a position that he is able to make his own now because he's been playing a little bit at left centre back in a 3, but going forward, that's highly unlikely to be our go-to formation. So, you could argue that maybe Saka could be second choice left back and also used in attacking positions, but it might leave us a bit light. So who knows? But the club would certainly, I'm sure, entertain offers for him. Maybe not as low as some of the numbers that we've seen touted, but it seems now that there's a few more clubs potentially interested that could drive the price up. So here's hoping that could be the case.
Yeah, and the figure that I was hearing just a couple of hours before we came on the pod now is Arsenal would like to get a 15 million euro return for him. So roughly somewhere 12, 13 million pounds. That seems like, as you said, he came on a free. That's a decent return, and should be mentioned. He's got a fair-sized wage too. That's another. When we look at all these outgoings, we talk about transfer fees, but some of these gentlemen, if you look at it, had some of the bigger wages on the club, and that's a benefit too.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, he came on a huge wage because of the lack of transfer fee. He was also Bundesliga Team of the Season left back when he joined. He was sought after by quite a few clubs. So to attract him to the club, you obviously are able to, first of all, give him more money because you're not spent anything on the transfer fee, but also because you want to attract him to come. So there's all sorts of rumours about the bonuses and things that he's on. I don't know. I don't have any connection to anybody that knows anything about his contract or anything like that. But obviously on a generous wage and would be a big saving in that regard as well.
Okay. Ryan, let's bring you back. Let's revisit. Again, we're looking for money, right? It's a little here, a little there. Couple of smaller buys, smaller sells could equal, we hope, a bigger buy. Let's go back to Hector Bellerin, namesake of our show. We're a bit sad. We may need to find a new name for the show, but that's for another day. He's apparently still in extended negotiations, as are with PSG, as are Arsenal with the club. We heard some preliminary numbers. Has anything new come to light? It looks like this story has real potential, has real legs to it.
Yeah, there's some reliable sources talking about it. Numbers are pretty much the same in every report, 25 million euros, 5 million add-ons and whatnot. But I think we can get more for Bellerin. He's still 3 years on his contract. He's not exactly horrendous at football. When you look at some of the players and their prices they're still going for, you talk about Aaron Ramsdale going from relegated Bournemouth to Sheffield United for 20 million. You think Bellerin, who's potentially one of the best right backs in Europe, potentially, I should say, I'm not saying he is, he could be. And obviously we need money, as does every other middle team in the country. And so he's someone we should sacrifice. So but I think we can get about 35 million for him, just because of his contract and his stature in the game and his stature at Arsenal. He's definitely someone we could push the boat out a little bit more and say, listen, come on now, bit more, please.
Well, PSG, as we know, can certainly afford to spend a little bit more. They're not one of these other clubs that's going to go hat in hand and say, no, we don't have it. We don't have it. PSG has it. If there's any club that you'd like to see negotiated with, of course, it doesn't hurt that the other clubs mentioned for him pretty deep pockets as well. I believe Bayern Munich was another name, and Barcelona was also kicked about. I haven't heard much about those two clubs, but that's if you're going for maximum return, that's the neighborhood to be shopping in or shopping towards.
Yes, that's the sort of clientele you want to be creating a bidding war with.
All right. Also need to get more players. Let's bring another name in. We haven't seen him because of injury, Sam, but Callum Chambers put a rather odd message out on Instagram this afternoon. It was a picture of him kind of walking down the tunnel at the Emirates with some a message about I forget, the text is not in front of me, but it had every action has you got to consider it. Seemed kind of cryptic. Is this a farewell? Maybe.
Possibly. Because just looking at it right now, it reads every day matters, every choice matters, every behaviour matters. So you could look at that one of two ways. You could see that as him saying, maybe I'm departing from the club. If that's the case, I would probably expect Fulham to come in for him. But also on the other hand of that is that he's just coming back from injury. He knows he's got to be careful with his body and with his injury and what he does next. So in terms of stepping that up, it could be saying every day matters in this rehabilitation, what he chooses to do and what his behaviours that he displays would certainly affect that, because you got to remember, he's probably not going to be right for another 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of an injury, he's got to be very careful on how he conducts his comeback and how he conducts his day-to-day, because any minor tweak or strain could put his setback back a numerous amount of weeks, if not months. So, as you say, it's a very cryptic post, but I'm not too sure which way you can take that at this point in time.
Okay. Let's talk about another player. I'm going to keep it here with you. Another player who had a rather melancholy message, and we know this is Rob Holding, and we know Rob is going. I'm not sure if Newcastle's announced him, but it's all but confirmed he's going out on loan with them this year. And if that's the case, we can look at a gentleman whose last two appearances for the club were successful ones. The FA Cup final and Community Shield is kind of, if we hope, well, maybe he comes back in some point in the near future. But if it's not, he's certainly going out in the high.
Yeah, definitely. What I read this morning from, I think it was the Chronicle up in Newcastle, is that Steve Bruce is trying to get a couple of players out. I think it was Fabian Schär and Lejeune. They're trying to get one of them two out the door first before bringing Rob Holding in. That's why it's being held up a little bit. But once they're able to do so, I fully expect Rob to be up there. But at the end of the day, he's done very well in the last two games that he's played for us. Other teams would have potentially looked at that and saw, if they see the Newcastle move breaking down, I have no doubt they'll be in for him within a shot. Because obviously we had Leeds in for him as well, but we saw Newcastle as a more viable fit for him. But ultimately, Leeds will still be looking for another centre-back. And if they can sniff there's, say, blood in the water, so to speak, then I've got absolutely no doubts they'll be back at Arsenal's door trying to convince them to agree a deal with them and get Rob with them. So it's just one to keep an eye on at this point in time. But we know with Newcastle, things are never simple with them.
All right, and you raise a good point. If Leeds is keeping an eye on this matter, I mean, one of the encouraging things and we're talking about building markets. Leeds has shown that they're coming back into the market, into the Prem aggressively. They're being very aggressive in the market. They've signed some good players and have spent a fair amount of money for a new arrival.
Yeah, Leeds certainly aren't afraid to spend. They've just spent 35 million euros on the Spanish striker who's playing at the moment, Rodrigo, from Valencia. So when I watched I think it's their Amazon Prime, it might have been on Netflix, but their Leeds documentary, you could really tell with their owners, once they got back into the Premier League, they really won't hold back in terms of spending, because they really want to establish Leeds back as a Premier League club, a club that will not be a yo-yo club, and eventually one to challenge for Europe. So they will try and put steady building blocks in place, and they really have got the financial backing to do so. And from what I've seen and spoken to a few of my Leeds friends, is that they are really, really desperate to get the team in place, and one that is going to be in place for quite some time. So they're looking for younger stars to obviously bolster their team. So I think Leeds will be a definite interesting team to keep an eye out. You never know. You might even see him come in for Guendouzi at some point in the window. You never know. But yeah, it's definitely one to look out for with them.
All right, and you bumped into my next question. Give it to Freddie. Freddie, you've been talking the last couple of appearances here about the need for all of us to exercise patience, that this is a process. Obviously, with the club looking, so far I've got 7 names, definitely, almost definitely outgoing. Torreira, Kolasinac, Socrates, Mkhitaryan is out. Bellerin, Chambers, maybe sooner or later. Rob Holding, that's 7. 2 other names that have real value, whether sooner or later. And we haven't heard much about them. I'm just wondering if you have anything new or can shed some light on the team's thinking about what they are going to do with Matteo Guendouzi. And obviously, Alex Lacazette, team has to really fish or cut bait with him. He's nearing the end of the contract. He's getting a little bit older. Everything seems to point to him going out, but at the same time, this is not something that the club needs to do rashly.
No, I mean, as I've said the last couple of times I've been on, Arteta wants something to happen with Lacazette this summer. Either sign a new contract if the club decide they want to keep him. I think Lacazette would be happy to stay, or move on, because otherwise you get into that situation again where players are in the end of their contract and end up leaving for free. So I think it's something the club will explore. They're obviously thinking about how they can raise money at the moment to, afford Partey's release clause and perhaps a couple of targets after that as well. And Lacazette will definitely be one they'll consider, but I don't think he'll be one that they consider first, if that makes sense. So they'll raise money via other means, selling other players first, I'm sure, and then maybe look at Lacazette. As for Guendouzi, I still think that the club are keen to move him on. The whole thing where people were panicking a little bit about, Arteta's changed his mind, back on the boat and all that sort of thing. As we said before, I think it was just a bit of PR spin, and the club are still keen to move him on. The problem is that there doesn't seem to be that much firm interest in him from teams, because he now has very well documented attitude issues. Teams don't have a lot of surplus cash to throw around this summer, especially ones that might have done in previous summers, like Atletico Madrid, who now are really struggling for money-wise and things like that. So definitely still think the club are keen to move him on. Perhaps Villarreal could be one with Unai Emery, who knows? I think that he's one that they're really keen to move on so that they can get a good fee for and invest elsewhere.
You put your finger on it. I was going to raise Villarreal because they came up a report probably a little over a week now that as soon as Emery went in, requests went out for his player, and we can talk about him as Emery's player. Emery was building the midfield around Matteo Guendouzi. I think it was pretty clear in the first half of the season. I think Arsenal was a little disappointed with the initial offer, but it does seem that's kind of like a fallback if they need it and they want to tap some they see an opportunity to go out and get another player. That might be something they go to. Might something similar to what we've just seen with Lucas Torreira, a good sized loan up front with an obligation to buy, once we hope COVID restrictions are lifted sometime in the new year and clubs get fans back in and their revenue streams get a little healthier.
Sorry, you asking if Torreira is one that we could get?
I'm asking if Torreira's if Arsenal might look at selling Guendouzi in the same way that they've just sold Torreira, where they took a good fee up front, a good loan fee, and then deferred some of the money as long as there's an obligation to buy.
Yeah, I think obligation to buy is one that we're seeing a lot more of. It's basically guarantees clubs cash in the future. And that's the thing with Arsenal, like we said before. I think I touched on it at the end of the last pod. It's not like Arsenal don't have cash that they could spend. It's basically not knowing whether, if they do spend a lot of cash, if they're going to be able to recoup it, considering the circumstances and everything. So if they do have a commitment from a club to pay a fee for Guendouzi next summer, for example, then Arsenal can easily say, right, well, now we can spend that 30 million euros because we know we're going to get it. Basically, we have got it. It's not like we're on the street waiting for someone to chuck some cash to us so that we can then go out and afford to buy some players. Doesn't quite work like that. So yeah, obligation to buy could be a good way forward because it's a commitment to a payment, and you can use that money.
All right. So Ryan, obligations. Let's keep that theme. Obligation. There is an obligation for Lucas Torreira. If perhaps an obligation for Guendouzi, and then who knows how Lacazette goes. Let's go back. Thomas Partey. Maybe if Arsenal are able to push some of these other deals and get enough money. Let's talk about order, because we've talked about priorities. Obviously, I think it's clear, even though there was a report out about 2 or 3 days ago, seems erroneous, just a kind of a clickbaity thing that said Arsenal have abandoned their pursuit of Thomas Partey. I don't think there's anything concrete to that. They still want him. It does seem that, again, they're trying to bring money in, and they also haven't given up on Aouar. But if you had to stagger them, who gets the priority? Let's start with that. Who gets priority?
That's a tough question, because I think they're just as important as each other for different reasons. Obviously, Partey, he makes the spine a lot better than what it was, and obviously Aouar gets our creativity onto a different level. But I feel like they're just as important as each other. I wouldn't prioritize either of them. I would say I'd split our people up and just go and sort them both out at the same time. Just get them done as quick as possible. It doesn't matter which one comes first, because they're just as important to me anyway as each other.
Okay, so, and Sam, to that end, let's say he says whichever one comes first. Does Arsenal really have to give up on the idea of getting both of them? Maybe it's just a matter of let's take one first. As we said, they've got a lot of potential deals in play. I mean, Lacazette, Guendouzi, Torreira, Kolasinac. You start adding them together, that money accumulates. Could this be a matter of maybe we can get one earlier in the window now in the next week or so, and then perhaps if we wait this out, there's still a month left in the window. Push for that other one later because of COVID. The flip of that is we talked about, hey, we're not getting quite as much selling these players, but it also seems if you look at the price for an Aouar, it seems to be creeping down. Thomas Partey has got a release clause that's kind of locked its price in, but it seems Arsenal intentionally or unintentionally might be able to turn that COVID market to their benefit.
Possibly. Obviously, as you say, Atletico Madrid are, reportedly saying that they're standing by the release clause. But with Aouar, Lyon's president, Alous, is rather difficult to deal with in terms of any deals. Mm-hmm. So I think that although the price is reportedly coming down, I think that he will try and hold out for at least 50 million euros. Although we can stagger that over the number of years of the contract, so in terms of it being all up front, it won't be. But I don't personally see him budging on the price, considering they need the money because, again, they're out of Europe. So they're going through a bit of a rebuild at the moment. So I just think at the moment I don't see any movement in the two prices. So depending on when some of our outs are, will be dependent on when we see one, if not both, to be honest. I don't see us trying to play the waiting game in terms of bringing them in later to try and get a reduced fee. I just don't see it.
So what is the condition then? Is just a matter of, can Arsenal sell as quickly as possible? Is that going to be the switch, in your opinion?
I think so. I think as soon as we see maybe 2 or 3 out, we'll go out and trigger both deals. That's what I see happening. And then depending on what else we need within the squad and whoever else is outgoing, we may see a few surprises towards the end. But I think that Arteta wants to get the crux of the team in place, and that includes Aouar and Partey. So, I just think in terms of couple, maybe 3 going out, and then we'll see them 2 come in.
So you're bullish on the idea of bringing both of them in this window?
Oh yeah, 100%. As Ryan said, they both bring something different to the team and something that Arsenal have lacked for quite some time. And it seems that Mikel has targeted the middle of the midfield after the defence as a real problem area for his tactics that he wants to deploy. So once he's got them in place, you'll probably see the change in formation, and you'll really see the formations that Arteta wants to implement.
Okay. Freddie, changing gears a little bit, an interesting and encouraging story in the press. Arsenal, of course, opens the Prem season. Their match against Fulham starts the entire league. Reports now that Arsenal are hopeful that they can get 20-25% capacity, get fans in the stands. I mean, we saw this with Brighton in an exhibition game about a week ago, a much smaller crowd, but it seemed to work out. Have you heard anything? That's exciting news. That there is, even on a slow wheel turning, but a return to normalcy, a return to cheering and seeing fans in the stands, not these computer animated paper fans that we've had to endure in order to get our football back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's difficult to get too excited because it's definitely just provisional. I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen day to day with this whole virus situation. The clubs have to make contingency plans for things like this, because if the situation does arise that things can remain stable and maybe numbers continue to decrease or a vaccine is found or whatever, then all of a sudden they're going to need to have something in place to be able to welcome people back. So obviously, with the way things are at the moment, a lot more planning needs to go into it as well, because of the new hygiene measures and stuff like that. It's not just as simple as reducing the capacity and keeping people seated apart. So it's just natural that they plan ahead. I think, nice to imagine that happening. I think it's as soon as October they're hoping for to make home games available to gold and platinum members. So that would be great, but it's still, and although that feels soon, it's still quite a long way off and a lot can change. So let's wait and see.
Well, you have to think all of the football world is watching this, hoping that it works. Just as we've talked about it from an economic perspective, even if you're 20% capacity, 30%, especially if you get up to 50%, your revenue's coming back. And that is, that's been the holdup for so much of what we're seeing. I think all the owners, all the clubs would breathe a giant sigh of relief and say, okay, we can plan for our future with a lot more certainty.
Yeah, I think that's the driving force behind, wanting to get fans back in the stadiums so soon. unfortunately, that's the way that football is. I think if anybody thinks that Arsenal want to get fans back in the stadium because they just love having the fans there so much, it's probably a bit naive. They want to get people back in so they can start earning money again on a match day, and to help secure their future a little bit more, because everybody's looking on sort of ominously at the moment, or have been for the last few months, about where football clubs are going to be in the future and how things are going to change. So they want to get things back as close to normal as possible, and by having fans in, there's another revenue stream that opens back up again. So certainly it's a big driving force behind it.
Right, and I don't know if fans saw this, but there was a statement issued by the Premier League today that they have terminated their agreement with their rights holder in China, which has got to send some tremors through the league, because that is one of the big markets for the Premier League. So, I think it increases the pressure to get fans back on a regular basis. I don't know. I haven't read enough to know if they're going to find a new content provider. I think they're probably trying that, or if they've closed the China market temporarily. But that's a huge hit to their. That's a revenue stream that's temporarily curbed. So fans in the stands has a double value, I guess, even more now than it would have before today. All right, gentlemen. Again, I wish we had more concrete. We have a lot of works in process. As we said, we're all waiting. We're all being patient while trying to follow Freddie's advice. Just deep breaths. It's working. It looks like the plan is working. Sam said we're all still bullish here, certainly in the pod, that Aouar and Partey are still the targets. Dani Ceballos is back in, though. Looking at Fulham, which is coming up very quickly, with the squad as it's constituted right now, you've got Ozil back, got Dani Ceballos back, you got Xhaka in. Does Mikel have enough firepower at his disposal today to be able to get through those first couple of weeks, certainly before like the first really big match with Liverpool looms on the horizon, in your opinion?
I think so. You'd hope so. With the first match being Fulham, you think. Sorry, is that for me?
Oh, either you can take it. I can ask all of you. I said you. I think I meant to say right. That's on me. But go ahead.
No. Yeah, I think Arsenal have enough in the tank to get through the first couple of weeks. All the teams are probably going to be a bit disadvantaged if they want to sign players, because players have to quarantine and players have to. Miss. A lot of players are going to have to miss the first few games of the season. Like Ceballos, for example, is not going to be available for the start of the season. So other teams will be in the same boat. Might be a bit of a slow start to the season. And the teams that can ride that out and perhaps have the most settled squads from last season that don't make or need to make too many changes will probably have the smoother transition into the season. So you'd like to think that Arsenal are on a level playing field with most of the other teams.
Okay, right, here we go. A similar question, but if he's a little bit reduced, Dani Ceballos isn't available. Obviously, all these names that we're talking about are not going to be available because they're probably going off somewhere. This is going to prioritize some of these kids who have shown so strongly in these last two matches. I'm thinking, we were talking 2 weeks ago about shipping Ainsley Maitland-Niles out, and now it looks like, given COVID, given the stagger, given the market, a guy like him, he might be one of those critical early pieces in the way that his young compatriot Saka was after COVID.
Yeah, I think a lot of reliance is going to be put on those two in particular because of their versatility in the early stages of the season. Because I just don't think a midfield of Xhaka and El Nene is the way forward. I don't think it's going to get us anywhere. So I would personally try Maitland-Niles in the middle next to Xhaka, have that extra bit of athleticism. And it's against Fulham and West Ham, and no disrespect to them at all, because on their day, both of them can beat us. But at the start of the season, after what's just happened, I think we could try Maitland-Niles in midfield with a Saka at number 10 or something similar to like that. Okay,
Sam, I'm going to give you the final word this week. Let's talk about the matchups now. We've been talking about transfers, ingoing, outgoing. These gentlemen have started to focus a little bit more on Fulham. Let's talk about the attack. Arteta has two options here. We've been talking all summer, and let's bring it up. Still haven't announced the extension for Aubameyang. We assume it's coming, but the thinking is he's going to be moved back to the middle. And Nketiah will be on the bench. Obviously, Aubameyang, Lacazette is not available right now, but he also has the option, and he's been doing it in these matches, of sticking with the formation and just minimizing the changeover, so he has continuity. We saw it in the Community Shield. Same lineup he had against Chelsea, same formation, 3-4, 3-4-3. Is the safe play the right play going out into this new season? As Ryan said, these are not on paper anyway, the most frightening matchups, but you can't take them for granted.
No, I think for team cohesion, I think 3-4-3 probably will be the formation we see, certainly for the first 3 games, whilst players are coming back, whilst new players are integrating into the team, and potential incomings, again, go through the quarantine, integrate into the team. So, yeah, I think 3-4-3 will be the formation going forward. I may have a little worry about that with Fulham, because I think they'll try and do a low block, and a 3-4-3 is relatively quite defensive, and you're relying on the other team to come out and play and push up against you, so you could then employ the counter attack. If Ozil is back in training and training well, I'd be tempted to go back to a 4-2-3-1, potentially put him in the number 10 for, 50, 60 minutes, see how he's getting on. And then, if need be, you can put someone like Saka in there. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, because obviously we also know that we're going to be playing, I think we've still got another 2 behind closed doors friendlies. Whether they be streamed or not, it's anyone's guess. But I think you could see Arteta deploying the 4-2-3-1 in some of them games. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
So talking about 4-2-3-1, you're talking about then having Ozil at the 10. You want Saka on the left and Aubameyang up top. Is that what you envision in that set?
Potentially, or if need be, you'd have Nketiah up top and Aubameyang out on the left. As I said, with Saka, you could potentially put him on the bench, ready to be swapped in for Ozil at number 10. But at the end of the day, it gives Arteta a few options in terms of swapping a few players around in certain positions, and maybe surprising the opposition. But personally, I think that it probably will be the 3-4-3 moving forward, just for the first couple of games anyways.
All right, and again, we've reached the end of regulation pod time, so we'll stop it there. As we said at the beginning, the movement is slow in the window. A lot of moves seem to be right on the verge, but they haven't happened. One thing that is moving is the growth of this pod, and so we want to thank all of you who are still watching right now, who are following us. Our numbers are steadily growing, and we hope we're kind of matching pace in aggressiveness and growth with the growth of the team. So we want to thank you, encourage you to come back. We will be back here on Tuesday, and hopefully we'll have concrete news, maybe a Aubameyang extension, maybe a definite outgoing or 2, and maybe 1, or who knows, 1 or more big names. But anyway, until then, for my UK bunch, for Sam, for Freddie, for Ryan, I'm Raphael. We thank you and bid you a good night.